The next segment of our slideshow today focuses on the most famous Renaissance artists. Now, if you happen to be interested in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you may recognize some of these names. The first one is Donatello, and Donatello was the first great sculptor of the Renaissance. Donatello revived the classical Greco-Roman style of sculpture that were realistic and could be viewed from all sides. So that's called sculpture in the round, which means you could view this sculpture of David from the Old Testament, a great king from all the way around if you wanted to. So here we've got the first large freestanding human sculpture of the Renaissance. The second person that I'd like you to be aware of is Michelangelo. He is also one of the most famous Renaissance artists, and like other artists of this time, he was multi-talented, like many of you. He was a painter, a sculptor, an architect, and a poet. His sculptures and paintings showed realism, detail of the human body, and expression to show personality and emotion. And what you're seeing here is one of his self-portraits. These are some of his most famous sculptures. The first one to the left is a sculpture called the Pieta, and this is capturing a moment from the New Testament that you may be familiar with if you're familiar with the Bible. The woman figured here is Mary, and the man laying on her lap is Jesus after he was crucified. Now, you'll notice the tremendous skill that Michelangelo had in being able to sculpt life-like fabric out of stone. He also sculpted David. I have to say I prefer Michelangelo's David over Donatello's, although I don't know if the real David, who was a Jewish king, in their culture, nudity would have really been looked down upon. So I don't really think that David himself would have liked any of these sculptures, but a lot of the heroes of the time were pictured this way. And so David, being a hero from the Old Testament, was pictured in a sculpture as you see here. Michelangelo's greatest work is the 130-foot by 44-foot ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I had the privilege of going to the Sistine Chapel, not this summer, but last summer, and I have to say it was quite an experience. It is much smaller than I imagined, but the walls and the ceiling and everything is alive with colors and very realistic looking figures. You come in one of these doors that you see pictured below where the altar is, and then you come and stand in this roped area, and typically it's packed and everybody's just looking up, kind of taking in the experience. What is on the walls are different scenes from the Bible. So if you're familiar with the Bible, it's kind of fun to look at and to try and figure out what each of the scenes depicts. It's very dramatic and it has amazing detail, power, and beauty. You can see an image here. You can see that the images are oriented different direction. Of course, this is all just painted, even though you get a sense of 3D form. That just tells you how masterful Michelangelo was as an artist. Oh, I wanted to point out this one image. This is a really famous image, and you may have seen this before. There's an older man, and then there's this man reclining here on the left, and their fingers are touching. And this shows the creation of Adam, and this is supposed to be God kind of reaching out and giving life to Adam here on the left. Probably the most famous artist of all from this time period is Leonardo da Vinci. And he was a painter, a sculptor known for incredible realism and emotion. But that's not all. As if he wasn't talented enough, he was also an inventor and scientist whose sketches reveal observations about human anatomy and new engineering technologies. So he kind of did it all. He's really amazing. You may have been to the Da Vinci exhibit in downtown Denver when it was here that focused specifically on Da Vinci's inventions, which are vast, and many of them are precursors to things that we just really take for granted now. One of his most famous paintings is The Last Supper. For those of you familiar with the Bible, it pictures Jesus here in the center. Sometimes kids get confused because people had longer hair and they'll think that there were lots of ladies at the table. At this particular table, this is all men. And disciples are people who are following Jesus. The night before Jesus was crucified, he had this special meal of bread and wine and basically told his disciples, hey, here's what's going to happen. One of you is going to betray me. In fact, it's the one of you that's going to dip your bread into the wine at the same moment I am. If you look carefully in this image, you can see Jesus's hand reaching toward a piece of bread, and over here to the left is kind of the unsuspecting Judas, also reaching his hand toward the bread. And of course, Judas is the disciple that reveals Jesus's location, and that begins the process of Jesus's crucifixion or death on a crucifix. Something that was really striking for the time was, first of all, the use of perspective in the painting. You can see that the vanishing point is Jesus's face. So your eye will kind of naturally go to his head, which is an intentional design on the part of Leonardo da Vinci. You'll also notice that the disciples here are pictured as very human. During the Middle Ages, any image that was biblical typically had saints or Mary and Jesus with halos. They almost looked like they were just floating through life. And Leonardo da Vinci really presses our understanding of what happened in the Bible during this time by showing people, depicting them as looking very human, like with, dirty feet and things like that, and all these expressions in debate. And you can see that there was quite an uproar, quite of a discussion about what Jesus was telling them about what was going to happen. Another famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci that you are surely familiar with is the Mona Lisa. Known for its emotion and depth, Mona means lady, so this was Lady Lisa, who lived in Florence and was getting her painting done. And of course, she's known for this mysterious smile. And there's all sorts of drama about this painting being stolen and taken to France and back to Italy. And gosh, it's really interesting. Here are some of Leonardo's inventions. You can see he was the first one to have this idea of a cannon, or a revolving set of basically weapons that could shoot one after another. And then this is his almost turtle-like idea of what a tank could be like. You can see extensive studies of the human body, just like doctors, surgeons would do today. However, at the time, this was considered extremely strange. Like, why in the world would you look at a body from the inside? They thought it was very wrong. But you can see here, he's really like an engineer, understanding the structure of the human body and how it moves. This is another one of his most famous paintings, the Vitruvian Man, and it's suggesting the perfect mathematical proportion of humanity. And this also does a great job of expressing humanism, really kind of putting humans in the center of it all. The next artist I wanted to mention was Raphael. He really perfected Renaissance painting, improving perspective and realism by studying Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. He came a little bit after them. He also became the favorite painter of the Pope. Remember, the church and the Pope and the Medicis were really the ones that were pushing art forward at this time. And he was liked because of his famous, amazing detailed paintings showing a combination of Greeks and Romans along with Renaissance people. I got to see this painting in Florence called the School of Athens. This is kind of like fantasy football. So Raphael takes figures from the past, like Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, Euclid, and he puts them in a room with his contemporaries, so people that were alive during his time. Of course, there were many hundreds of years in between these times, but he kind of had this fantasy gathering of all of these really important, great people that were both from two different time periods. This is showing the perspective again, the betrothal of the Virgin Mary to Joseph. This was a painting by Raphael. And looking at an architect, we've got Brunelleschi, probably Florence's greatest architect. He studied the Roman Pantheon and then went to build the Cupola of Maria del Fiore Cathedral in Florence. And this dome is not only still standing, which shocked people at the time because it did not have what are called flying buttresses or supports on the outside of the building, but was designed so well that it was freestanding. This was like miraculous for the time. So the design has been used in other modern buildings, like, well, St. Peter's would not be quite as modern. St. Paul's in London, the US Capitol right here in Washington, DC. And so you can see the Renaissance influence passing through Europe and on to the Northern Renaissance. The Renaissance spread from Italy as scholars and merchants from other areas visited Italian city-states. So what starts in Italy does not stay in Italy. As these ideas spread, this Northern Renaissance developed its own characteristics. The Renaissance spread from Italy is, oh, I read that already. Okay, so you can see Gutenberg's printing press. You can see the French and the Spanish invading and then taking pieces of Italian culture when they returned to their own countries. The Renaissance in France was most known for its unique architecture. Really beautiful there. The Renaissance in England was most known for literature, especially the plays of William Shakespeare. And this is what Mrs. Doyle will be focusing on in her study of the Renaissance with you. And the Renaissance in the Netherlands was most known